Do you know the one habit that separates amateur poker players from the pros? Don't worry if not, today you're going to learn it. Spoiler alert, it's not flopping sets more often or having better intuition. It is what I call Daniel Negreanu's golden rule. If you stick to his rule and master this one skill, then low stakes poker will feel like you have your own personal ATM. But if you're not following this rule, you're practically handing your chips over to your opponents, gift wrapped with a bow on top. My name is Andreas Wagner, I'm a live poker coach and have always been a big fan of Daniel Negreanu's. If you want to understand Negreanu's golden rule, let's look at a hand I once played where I totally ignored this rule. It was a 1-2 game at the Hippodrome in London. There was a small raise in the low jack. I had king-queen offsuit in the cutoff and decided to 3-bet to isolate the weak player who had raised. But as it so often happens in live low-stakes poker, the cutoff and the button both cold-called my 3-bet and the original raiser also called. We went 4 ways to the flop and this flop looked amazing. Queen, 8 rainbow, it could hardly be better. I c-bet quite small, no reason to bet big in this spot, and only the button called. By the way, if you want to learn how to c-bet correctly, make sure to get my free ebook c-bet mastery, the link is in the description below. But anyway, we went to the turn, which was a 10 that brought in a flush draw. I now sized up to about half pot and villain called again. The river was pretty much a blank. I went for another street of value, bet around half pot again. Villain now raised all in and I snap called. I had trips with a really good kicker after all, right? Villain turned over his hand and showed pocket 8s for a full house. I was shocked. What a cooler, I thought in that moment. I had such a big hand and Villain just happened to have an even bigger one. But was it really a cooler? Had I considered Negreanu's golden rule, I would have understood that it wasn't quite a cooler. I would still have lost a lot of money with this hand, but not my entire stack. Okay, so how could I have gotten away from this hand with the help of kid poker? So here is Negreanu's golden rule, who famously said, don't just think about what you have, think about what your opponent has. This simple rule forces you to shift your mindset. Instead of focusing solely on your cards, like so many players at low stakes do, you'll start piecing together the story your opponent is telling with their actions. You'll ask yourself, what hands make sense for them to play this way? Are they likely bluffing or does their line indicate a monster? How does my hand stack up against their possible range? This is such a simple concept, but so difficult to follow when you're in the heat of the moment. But let's break down how I could have saved myself some money and how you can do the same next time when you're in a similar situation. Everything starts pre-flop. If I had spared a second to think what an opponent would cold call a 3-bet with, I would have come to the conclusion that it will be some sort of medium to good pocket pair, say 7s through jacks, as well as some suited broadways like ace-queen, king-jack, maybe king-10, etc. Then on the flop, once I bet really small, he would still call with every single one of those pocket pairs, with any queen X hand of course, and that's probably it. With 2 other opponents in the hand, I doubt that he would call with a hand like king-jack with a backdoor flush and straight draw. When I bet the turn fairly big, and note, it was only a half pot, but a 65-pound bet at a 1-2 is still a pretty big bet. So when I bet this big, what does he call with here? I couldn't rule out jacks, 9s, 7s, but it seems more likely that he would fold most of these hands and only continue with a queen or better. And how is our king-queen doing against a queen or better? Well, we lose to ace-queen, to queen-10, to pocket 8s and to pocket 10s. We win against queen-jack and we chop against king-queen, but because there is only one queen left in the deck and we assume that he wouldn't call with offsuit broadways, there is only one combo of king-queen and one combo of queen-jack left. I'm already not loving this spot. But then I put even more money into the pot on the river and he jammed over my triple barrel. What would he do this with? Well, we can't rule out that he overplays his king jack or queen jack, but as I said, there are so few combos of these hands that even if he does shove with them, it's still a bad call because there are so many combos of all the other hands that beat us. As silly as it might seem, this is a trivial fold at live low-stakes poker. This was just one example, but there are so many other spots where even good players lose a lot of money when they ignore Negreanu's golden rule. So what is the key to reading your opponent's hand range? We'll get to that in a second, but first, here's what happens when you don't consider your opponent's range. You overvalue hands like top pair, top kicker in spots where your opponent clearly has the nuts. You miss out on profitable bluffs because you fail to recognize when your opponent has a weak range. And worst of all, you pay off huge bets from players who are obviously really strong. So how can you improve your hand reading at the table? The first step is to actually practice this off table. Just like I did in my example here. After I got home, I went through all of Villain's actions. This sounds like it won't be of much help because you will already have lost your money, but trust me, this is a great way to get started because once you do this regularly, you will train your hand reading muscle. And then you will do this more automatically when you do play. The second tip to improve your hand reading is to range players when you're not involved in a hand. After you fold your 9-4 offsuit, stop scrolling on your phone or watching TV. Instead, pay attention to the players who are left in the hand. I constantly try to range everyone in a hand. I ask myself, what kind of hands could he have when he bets in this spot, or calls in this spot, or raises here? I am of course often wrong with my assumptions, but this exercise keeps me engaged and at the very least I will pay attention to showdowns and how hands went. This alone is worth a lot. The aim is to get to the point where the first thing you do whenever you're in a hand is to think about your opponent's range. You don't have to think about exact hands. It's enough to say to yourself something like, he called in this spot so he could have a pair, a flush draw, and very rarely just ace high. That is already better than what 90% of live low-stakes players do. And if you continue improving in this department, you might be able to seriously rack in money by following in Daniel Negreanu's footsteps. By the way, what do Daniel Negreanu and I have in common, and even Alexandra Botes, the chess player turned poker pro? Well, we all have a Romanian family background but fell in love with poker far away from the country of our ancestors. Maybe we can stage the Romanian Diaspora Championship one day and even Count Dracula might join. But back to poker. How does Daniel Negreanu consistently outplay his opponent? Negreanu is renowned for his hand-reading abilities, often vocalizing his thought process at the table. Here's an example of his incredible hand-reading skills. In the super high roller bowl, where the buy-in was $300,000, Negreanu raises Jack 10 suited and gets called by a player with pocket nines. The flop comes 6, 7, 8 rainbow.
We got sixes, we got sevens, we got eights, we got straight draws, we got flush draws, we got all kinds. So what we got to do here is put one blue chip in.
Okay. Would you have found this fold? Negreanu says out loud what his opponent could have. His villain raises Negreanu's c-bet and Daniel calls. The turn is an incredible 9, giving Negreanu the nuts and his villain top set, but they both check. The river pairs the board, Negreanu checks and his villain overbets now. We know that he has a boat because we can see it on the screen, but what was Daniel's thinking process? He went through the hand again. Villain called pre-flop, he raised on the flop, then checked back the turn when the 4-liner to a straight came, and then he overbet the river when the board paired. Negreanu figured that his villain must have had a full house and folded. Negreanu's ability to piece together betting patterns, timing, and player tendencies allows him to pinpoint specific hands. You don't have to be at his level to make money at the live low stakes, however. What you need, apart from hand reading, is a solid understanding of what your opponents do wrong and exploit those tendencies. In this video here, I show you how to do just that.